I have David Smith and Martin County, Kristi Brantley, and myself, and I think we lost Michael Taylor, but he would, yeah.
Well, hopefully he'll see the chat and be able to log in.
John Brandon.
I could put it in this chat too.
Okay. Do you mind muting everybody but me in case they come in?
If I can figure out how to do it, I will.
Okay. If you can't, don't worry about it. We're all good.
Participants. Is it under participants or?
It kind of depends on what you're. Look under host.
Host. Okay. Where am I? Oh, host tools. Yeah. Gotcha. Not meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And you guys on Zoom are able to see my picture, right? Okay. All right. My name is Kristi Brantley. Thank you guys for having me. I work out of the Raleigh office. I worked out of the Greenville office for a few years when I was working on my master's degree, and that's how I met Reed. Reed was one of my mentors, so I'm very fond of the Greenville office. I live in Nash County, so I could work in Raleigh or Greenville, but my territory is the entire state, so they have me out of the Raleigh office, even though I've tried to get back to Greenville. Let's see, what was I going to, I went back to school to get my master's. I wanted to work in archives, kind of archival research kind of stuff, and I had needed to do an internship as part of the requirement, and that's how I wound up at the Historic Preservation Office. I went back as an older adult, 3 kids and married, and back in 2015, and started my internship at the Historic Preservation Office in Greenville, and they have not been able to get rid of me. So I have been with them in some form since then. I'm very fortunate that I had that opportunity, and it just wonderfully fascinating. I also, I'm not super familiar with Martin County, just on my way to the east, but Reed rode me around for a little while, and I am a little familiar from working in the Eastern office, but I do have family ancestors who were out of Martin County, Hardisons, and that they moved down to what was Craven County at the time, but it's actually Pamlico County now. So I will be back to do some research too. So, all right. So this map, has anyone ever seen this map? Are any of you familiar with this map? Okay, great. I always show this. This is our map, and we call it HPO Web, and it's all the known historic resources that our Historic Preservation Office is aware of in North Carolina. One reason I wanted to show this to all of you, because I feel like you guys are history geeks like me and like to do some research. Right now, those blue dots are National Register properties. You can Google this and get this map, and if you can't find it, you reach out to me and I'll get it to you. If you click on the blue dot, you can go to a box will show up, and there'll be a link to the National Register nomination. And so you can see the National Register nominations of all these National Register properties and districts across the state. And if you enjoy researching, they have those National Register nominations have bibliography. So they're a wonderful, wonderful resource. And I will use this map throughout the presentation. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to turn some layers off to show you some other things that I feel like will be helpful to you if you decide to create a Historic Preservation Commission. All right, so first let's kind of start from the beginning. There are 3 different types of designations in North Carolina primarily. There is the National Historic Landmarks, National Register of Historic Places, and local designations by ordinance, which is what we're going to really talk about more later this afternoon. Got to keep up with my time, y'all, I'm sorry. Still feels like morning to me. So, and they can overlap each other. So the federal government is, through the National Park Service, They kind of organize and are in charge of the National Historic Landmarks and the National Register of Historic Places. Now, North Carolina has about 40 National Historic Landmarks. There's not any regulation on them. It's honorary. It's properties that are significant to American history and culture. The National Park Service does that. They write those, get those nominations written. They take care of all of it. The thing about National Historic Landmarks, if it's a National Historic Landmark, it is also on the National Register. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you next applies to National Historic Landmarks. So the National Register of Historic Places is also a federal program. However, the state administers it. So, in fact, the reason Lauren is not here, they have a meeting 3 times a year to usher those nominations to the National Park Service, and today's one of those follow-up meetings. So they're long, they're fun, but they're long. But the National Register of Historic Places is a planning tool for the government. It came about from the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, and was in response to urban renewal, all these properties being destroyed because of development. And I think the big kicker, are you familiar with Penn Station in New York City? And they demolished Penn Station, and I think that was the final straw. And so the response was the National Historic Preservation Act. And that set up the National Register of Historic Places. So it's still honorary. There's not any restrictions. There's not any regulations, unless you get tax credits. And if you're listed in the National Register of Historic Places, you're potentially eligible for tax credits. And that's where I want you to talk with Reed. Reed's brought some information about tax credits, and when we're finished, we can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like. So you guys have any questions so far? Okay. So I need a stylus, y'all, but I did this with my computer. I pulled Martin County out. The blue are the National Register properties in Martin County. You have 5 districts and 24 individual resources. And y'all have a real curvy river, so that was a lot of fun, me trying to do my mouse, but I enjoyed doing it. But anyway, that kind of shows you, that does not mean there aren't properties that are worthy of National Register beyond this. There are, I mean, just riding here from, I came out of Rocky Mountain this morning, once I hit Martin County, there's a lot of properties worthy of National Register. It's just hasn't, the owners haven't been interested or whatever reason. I did pull out the 5 National Register districts. In 1980, Hamilton was listed, the Hamilton National Register District. 95, Williamston Commercial. 98, Conahoe. I asked Reed 2 days ago, how do you pronounce that? Let me make sure I pronounce that right. And then 2001, Williamston, and 2014, Everett. So these are the National Register districts. If you're interested in doing a local historic preservation commission, you do not have to use these National Register districts as your local districts. As we'll get into later, this is a local government issue. You're welcome to use our information. You're welcome to use the information that we have, the files. Use that as a base if you want to, but you do not have to. It's 2 different things. And this does show at least, I think, in Conahoe Creek Historic District, up at the top, there's an individual farm that's listed. Do y'all in Martin County pronounce it Sherrod or Sherrod? Sherrod. Sherrod. Okay, in Nash County we pronounce it both ways, so it's Sherrod Farm. So my sister-in-law was a Sherrod, but her cousin was a Sherrod. So it was just kind of funny that one showed up, and I love her. She's awesome. But anyway, so we're really talking about apples and oranges when we talk about National Register and local designation, and a lot of people struggle with getting it confused. I follow a lot of Facebook pages of genealogy and old house photos, Watson Browns. I have a few more to follow now. But they will post when a house is being demolished, and it never fails. Someone says, but that was on the National Register. How can they tear that down? They can. You can put it on the National Register today and tear it down tomorrow. There's no regulation. And it is something, unless you do this every day, it's something people struggle with understanding that National Register has no restrictions. Local designation, on the other hand, can have more restrictions. So what's the difference? I told you earlier, National Register is a federal program. National Park Service does it. The state administers it. Local designation is completely local government. So our office really definitely has no authority. In legislation, if you are going to designate something, you are required to send us the report. We review it and give you non-binding comments. So if you don't like our comments, you don't have to adhere to them. You just have to consider them. That's our legislation. So we have no oversight over local. It is totally a local government program. It's not, National Register is not restricted. Local designation is restricted by what are called certificates of appropriateness. Usually, almost always, probably 90% of the time, exterior only is the only thing that would have to be regulated. National Register, they're considered in federal undertakings. So remember when I told you it was a federal planning tool? So if there's any federal money, federal permits, a lot of times you see DOT stuff that gets some federal money. It goes to our environmental review branch to try to mitigate any adverse effects on the historic property. So that's how the federal government kind of tries to plan for these historic properties when they have work being done or there's work being done using their money. If it's only locally designated, it's not considered in any federal undertaking unless it's also in the National Register. Same thing with tax credits. Locally designated properties are not eligible for tax credits unless they're also listed in the National Register, and then they're potentially eligible depending on the situation. Now, individual local landmarks are eligible for a 50% tax deferment, and that's county and whatever municipality they're living in, up to a 50% tax deferment, but that's only individual properties like that Sherrod Farm, that's an individual property, whereas the district, like Williamston Commercial District, unless it's also individually locally designated, if you designated Williamston Commercial District as a local district, they would not be eligible for the 50% tax deferment. Does that make sense? Okay. I kind of went around my thumb to get to my elbow to explain that one, so I apologize. All right, so now we're going to talk more about local designations, and these are at the bottom you'll see the general statutes that speak to that. So I try to add these in so that if you get a copy of a PDF of my slides, you can go back and reference them. So why do we have local designations? Well, our state legislation actually speaks to that, and they felt that the heritage of our state is one of our most valued and important assets. And they look at it from an economical view, and it stabilizes and increases property values, and it strengthens the overall economy of the state. And that's found in North Carolina General Statute 160D-940, which is also on this slide. But there's lots of other reasons to have historic preservation, and these are just some. Heritage tourism is huge. It's huge in North Carolina. If you think about the places that you go to for vacation or little day trips, where do you like to go? What do you like to see? More than likely, it's towns with character, or areas that are beautiful and have character. And so heritage tourism is a huge reason to have historic preservation. I mean, you guys can read your identity, smart growth, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more. Cultural, environmental responsibility. I don't remember who it is that said it. Reed might know, but the greenest house is the one already built. So it's lots and lots of reasons that historic preservation are important to you and to your community. Well, how does a local government designate individual landmarks or districts? The first step would be to establish a historic preservation commission. Now, so the state of North Carolina authorizes in those general statutes how to establish a historic preservation commission, and we'll go over that a little bit more in just a second. Martin County is countywide, so if you wanted to do a countywide preservation commission, you could do that. There are a lot. I'm getting ready to show you some more counties that do that. You would need if you wanted to do historic preservation within a planning jurisdiction like Williamston, you would need an interlocal government agreement with Williamston in order to do that, or Robertsonville, or any of the others that are separate planning jurisdictions. There are over 100 in North Carolina, several counties, Currituck County, Transylvania County, Orange County, Wake County, Buncombe County, Jackson County. I feel like I'm missing several, but you get the idea. Guilford County, Alamance County, you get the idea. It doesn't have to be just like it wouldn't have to be just a town or a city that set up a historic preservation commission. So state legislation authorizes this, and they have some requirements, and they require that you have at least 3 members. And we'll go back one screen. You see my 3 members is starred. That's because further down the road, so say you establish a historic preservation commission, once you've been active at least a year, usually it's more, you can apply for what's called certified local government status. And that is a partnership with the state and with the federal government through the National Park Service. You are agreeing to follow state legislation in protecting your properties. There's a report involved every year. The commission is required to attend some training, at least 2 members and staff. One of the reasons many of the commissions do that, it's an honor to be a certified local government, but it also opens you up to potential grants. So all state historic preservation offices receive money from the federal government, not taxes, it's outer continental oil and gas leases. So we all split this big pot of money. It's state historic preservation offices and tribal historic preservation offices. And each year we're allotted a certain amount of money. We're required to take 10% of that money and put it back into the certified local governments. So there's a grant cycle every year. We're in the middle of a grant cycle right now. There are specific things that you could use that for, but there are several. Okay. And the reason I went back to this screen is you'll notice that some of these historic preservation commissions are blue and some of them are green. The green ones are certified local governments. So there's 55 in North Carolina. Back to Historic Preservation Commission, you guys can read this. You have to have terms no greater than 4 years, but you can renew your terms. So majority must have a demonstrated special interest, and you must reside within the planning and development jurisdiction. Now, I know some counties will have one person from each of the local governments they have an interlocal agreement with. That's fine. However, it just has to be within the planning and development jurisdiction. That does not mean it has to be in the local historic district. So if you set up a local historic district, you don't have to live in that to be on the commission. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. Also, North Carolina General Statute, the legislators gave you superpowers. I call them superpowers. There's 11 of them, and they're found in 160D 942. And there's lots of things you can do beyond just recommending historic preservation designations and regulating those. So what we've done is broke them down into kind of like 3 different groups. So you identify properties, you recommend to the local governing board the properties that you feel are of special significance. If they do become designated landmarks or districts, you do regulate those through COAs, certificates of appropriateness. That's a quasi-judicial process, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then advocating and educating. So the rest of them are pretty much education. And I want to emphasize that, because as a historic preservation commission, a new one especially, or all of them, your job isn't just to tell people what to do with their property, right? And that's a lot of the concern when establishing these. But your job is to learn as much about historic preservation so you can share that with the people, so that when they come to you and want to put vinyl siding over their frame house or do something to their property, it's not a matter of saying, no, you can't do that. It's why. It's because it's going to harm this building. Historic building material does not react to modern material the same way. And part of the job of the Historic Preservation Commission is to educate the public about historic preservation. These are some examples we have at the top right-hand corner. Cemetery workshop we did down in Beaufort, a window repair workshop in Wilson. I don't know if y'all recognize that fellow at the bottom left-hand corner talking about tax credits in Tarboro. There's a story map on here, social media, a walking tour. Hendersonville, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they create a coloring book every year for their 5th graders of all their historic properties and distribute that to the elementary school. Just all kinds of stuff that you can do and should do if you establish a commission. Be careful with social media. I don't need to tell y'all that, though, because you've got it. Just make sure you have someone to monitor it constantly, because there are sometimes not nice people out there. Yes, it is. It's very sad and unsettling at times. If you have a commission, what are you supposed to designate? What are you to preserve and to protect? The property or district needs to be of special significance, and it needs to possess integrity. So, like integrity of setting. So it would need to be in the same setting that it was built in, more than likely. It doesn't have to be all of these, but in a district it does. But individuals, it could be association with somebody who made a big difference in Martin County. You need something, integrity of design. So you don't want the original property to be just like a little gable end house, and then you designate something that has turned into a Beaux Arts or something. I mean, you have to designate properties that have that integrity of their original design, or their design when the person that's associated with it that was important lived there. And that's stuff we can go into later. If you do establish a commission, I'm happy to come back and get into the nitty-gritty with you on some of this. It's not as complicated as it sounds, though. This is that same map, and these are all the local designations in North Carolina that we're aware of. I'm sure there are others, because legislatively you're not required to let us know when you designate something. But these are the ones that have let us know, and it's a good number. When a property is designated, The Historic Preservation Commission recommends that to the local governing board, and that local governing board designates it by ordinance. So it's a type of zoning, sort of. Now, the part that makes people uncomfortable is the actual regulation of these properties. And usually that happens in districts, but sometimes it happens in individual properties too, where they're uncomfortable with it. The exterior of the building is the only thing that's regulated. And if you're going to erect, alter, restore, move, or demolish anything, you would need a certificate of appropriateness. The Historic Preservation Commission does have discretion over whether or not to regulate signs, color, significant landscape features, archaeological features, natural features. I know Washington regulates trees, I believe. Many North Carolina local governments regulate trees. There are also many that regulate paint color. We do not recommend you regulate paint color. Paint's going to change. The color's going to change. It's not a long-standing thing. Unless we're talking about masonry, bricks, historic brick, it's dangerous to paint that in many cases. And that's Reed's wheelhouse. I don't want to jump into his territory, and he can talk with you more about that. But as a commission, you will have been educated. You will educate yourself in that so that you can share that with the constituents in the community. How about the interior? Well, in a local district, the interior is not considered. In individual landmarks, if the owner gives you permission and wants to consider or regulate and protect some features within the historic building, they can do that. But it's at owner's consent, and it's specific features. So like a staircase or a mantel or the ceiling or the floors. But that's at the owner's consent. So basically the purpose of the certificate of appropriateness is to prevent changes that would be incongruous with the special character of either the landmark or district. And I always struggle with that word, incongruous. All right. There are certain things that aren't prohibited, such as ordinary maintenance and repair or public safety issues. Also, use of the property. A local historic preservation commission cannot regulate how a property is used. That may come into the planning jurisdiction and to their offices, but not the Historic Preservation Commission. So a certificate of appropriateness, a commission just doesn't say, go in there all willy-nilly and say, oh yeah, I like that, I don't like that. There are design standards that are created, and this is a quasi-judicial board at that point when they review certificates of appropriateness, and they have to use what's in those design standards that the commission would create, and I always encourage the community to participate in that process. And based on those design standards is how they would regulate or approve or disapprove or approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness. Now there's some minor things that really doesn't need to go before a commission, and you can include those in your design standards, and that would go to the local government staff, and they could just sign off and you don't have to go through the whole process. Now if the local government staff though is like, yeah, I don't think this is good for it, I don't think this is what you need to do, the local government staff cannot deny a COA. It automatically, if they don't agree with it, it goes to the Historic Preservation Commission. And these are the front of Mount Airy's design standards and Edenton's, and I think that's a Tarboro Certificate of Appropriateness application. Does that look familiar to you? So when I talked about CLGs earlier, I told you that they had to do some reporting, and so I just share this with you so you can see. Of the 55 CLGs, this is from last year's reporting, we go by the federal year. Those 55 CLGs had 2,720 certificates of appropriateness come before them. 2,596 of those were approved or approved with some conditions. Like, I don't even know what are some minor conditions. Usually it's some minor stuff that they would have to do. I have 85 denied. That is one of the biggest numbers I've had in a while. Usually it's like in the 30s that are denied totally across those 55 local governments. But I haven't delved into the report this year to see if somebody answered something twice or added something to it. The 85 is a high number. Usually it's much less. And then there are about 100 that were withdrawn. So it just kind of gives you an idea. People think, oh, I have to get a certificate of appropriateness, but usually a commission will work with that person, and it's not as daunting as it seems. There is one thing I told you, that if you built your house, if you had your house given the honor to be placed on the National Register today, that tomorrow you could demolish it, and that is correct. If it's in a local historic district or locally designated, it would need a certificate of appropriateness. And the Historic Preservation Commission could deny that demolition up to 365 days. The reason for that is to give them time to work with the property owner to come up with an alternate plan. There is one special thing in legislation that's properties that are of statewide significance, the Historic Preservation can deny demolition. There's only 11 such properties across the whole state. That is a special designation where the local government would have to apply to our state historic preservation officer, and he would have to make that determination. It's not an automatic determination, and that's, again, more details than you need, but I can share that with you if we get to that point. It's just very rare. And finally, I did it again. I need that stylus, don't I, with your curvy river. But I took that first map that I showed you guys and I pulled it out. If you guys have a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of great stuff that's not recorded on this map. I don't know when the survey was done. A long time ago, I'm sure.
Late 90s.
Late 90s. So most of what you see is not anything past the late 90s. And rule of thumb for historic properties is they have to be 50 years or older. It was very humbling when I had my 50th birthday a few years ago, because I was considered historic. But there's a lot of great stuff that I just saw just driving in today that Reed pointed out to me. But we have files on all these properties. And if you ever need one that's not a National Register, let me know and I'll get it for you. But you can use this as a base. The local Historic Preservation Commission can use this as a base survey of their historic properties. And if you're worried about, or if you're interested in learning more about the economic piece, I encourage you to go to placeeconomics.com. That's an economist out of Maryland, I believe, who does a lot of, oh, that's fine. This is my last one, so your timing was good. Okay. He's an economist out of, I think, Maryland or DC. I think it's Maryland. And he's done a lot of studies about how historic preservation, how important it is to the economy. And he's done a lot of those studies in North Carolina. Sometimes he's got a whole team, but sometimes he actually speaks. His name is Donovan Ripkema. And even though this quote is specifically about historic districts, I really love it because, the purpose of local designation isn't to set something so that it's set on a shelf and it never changes. It's to protect it and to kind of manage that change in a way that it continues to have its integrity and continues to be important to the community. So it's not, if you think about it, honestly, you think about electric lines, you think about satellite dishes, when we used to have satellite dishes, I'm telling my age again. You think about all the stuff, air conditioning. If we wanted to set something in amber like it talks about here, we would not designate anything that had those changes. So historic preservation is about, and Reed can talk to this, it's about making the changes in a way that is not detrimental to the property.
And is as unobtrusive as possible.
Good word, unobtrusive. Yes, ma'am. Yep, absolutely right. So, thank you guys for having me. If you have any questions, I know I threw a lot at you. There's a lot of information. I'm going to share these slides with Wayne and Drew, and you can share them with others if you'd like. You'll have my email on it. If you have any questions, we're here to help you. So.
And I just want to say something. I thank you for coming.
Uh-huh.
I thank you for making all this presentation. I hope maybe it has really kind of clarified some things in some people's mind, because there was just so much you can do within the parameters that exist. I mean, people get the feeling, well, if I do this, I can't do that, or you know, like
Right.
that is really not true. I mean, I know. I mean, I've been involved, and so. And it's not as hard to do it. I mean, when you're talking about something, it sounds like, oh Lord, that's a lot. But it's really not.
No, it's not.
It's more like, remember that keep it simple thing? Okay, you keep it simple. I mean, you don't let those nuances that you're hearing in your little brain that's saying, oh my God, I can't do this, can't do that. You don't let them take precedent. You keep it simple, and you can walk right through it. It's just a process. That's all it is. It's a process. Okay, I just want to throw that out there because I hear people say, "Oh, no, wait a minute, that ain't the way it is." You know, you just need to keep it simple. And Reed knows what I'm talking about.
If you have a house that's, say, 127 years old, and it's a wood, you know it has to be, but wood, they've covered it up with vinyl.
Uh-huh.
How does that affect the?
So it really varies, but if it was to be locally designated, they should not require you to take the vinyl out. I don't think they would require that. Now, if you had to make any if you had, say, a tree fell through one side or something, they may relook at it then, but you don't have to go back and fix any changes that are already there once it's designated. If you have a property that has a lot of changes and you want it designated, they may say, well, if you get this fixed or put back like it was, we'll probably consider it, but they won't do it. If you're designated as it is, it will not be regulated. It will be regulated as is.
We have a lot of homes in Janesville that's 100, from 100 right on up to about 140 years old, and most of them have been. I don't say all. I'm just saying the majority have been taken care of. And there's one that that had to add the disability thing.
Right.
That doesn't take away from it either. Is that correct?
That you're talking about a ramp?
Yeah.
It should not, no. All that would be in your design standards.
Yeah,
but there are ways,
I mean, these were questions that were thrown out, so that's why
and there's ways to do those ramps. Reed's who you would need to talk to do stuff like that to help protect the integrity.
right.
And I know, just like over in Butler County, Washington has a really big historic preservation group over there, and they have actually made allowances because of certain types of things that have happened to structures to allow them to put vinyl siding on some structures over there. And I know you're so I mean, within the parameters of this stuff, there's all kinds of ways to address things.
There is. And, this is a local government issue. This isn't us coming in. Now, if you have a National Register property and you want tax credits, yeah, Reed's going to tell you what, but he'll work with you. But that's when we can require some things. But local designations, local districts, we'll give you advice. We'll give you lots of advice, but we have no
I would
correct.
think it'd be in the best interest of the local government to somewhat regulate based on your guidance, just a good standard for that.
And the standard that's usually used is and especially if you want to move towards certified local government status, is the Secretary of the Interior's rehabilitation standards. I heard you say, were you with EA with the school?
Yeah, I'm with the Easy Hayes alumni.
So you
That's what
guys-
we've been looking at as we begin to.
Reed has told me a lot. He uses y'all as an example all the time. He is so proud of y'all. But yeah, so the Secretary of Interior standards you're familiar with. We actually have some local government that just use that as their design standards, and you can do that to get started. It's like the 10 Commandments of historic preservation, it's pretty much, what is it? Brett always says it's like what's the doctor's oath? Yeah, pretty much do no harm. But we do encourage, because Martin County is unique. Martin County is not like Wake County. Thank goodness. I'm sorry I didn't say it. Martin County is not like Alamance County. I mean, you're unique, and we encourage you to set up design standards, and we'll help you with them if you would like, but we encourage you to set up design standards that speak to Martin County or whichever local government.
So the question I have, so in my position, trying to encourage like economic development, revitalization downtown, stuff like that, it would be easier to market some of these buildings to individuals if you could show that it had that historic designation and could receive tax credits. Obviously, anything that could save money to someone trying to buy an old building and renovate it.
Right.
Because, like reuse and stuff like that is tricky trying to get it for private parties. How do you do that? Like, if the owner is somebody not from here, which a lot of the buildings in our downtown areas are owned by people wherever.
Yeah.
How much compliance do you have to have with the owner of it? I mean, how does that work? Like, would you have to?
So, legislation. So I think you've got a couple of questions in there, and you're asking owner permission to designate.
Yeah. So, like for instance, we got an old bank in downtown Wilmington. It's called the Baker White Building.
Okay.
It's a very unique design building that it really doesn't need to go away. If it goes away, it's just a landmark in downtown.
And it's important.
And if you were trying to encourage a private party to purchase it from the current owner, renovate it, if you could show that tax credit, I think it would help market that building.
So, and that would be National Register, and I'm going to turn this over to Reed. I do want to, because that's his wheelhouse, but I do want to mention, this is up to you, but local legislation does not require the property owner to designate.
Okay, and that's what I'm getting at.
And now, if you want to put a sign up, you do have to have the property owners, but it doesn't. And there are some local governments that have that in their UDO, though, that they get owner permission. There are, right now, Southport is trying to get a historic district. They've worked really hard, and they're getting a little bit of pushback because of a few of the owners. Legally, they could go ahead and designate that right now, but they're working with those people who are opposed to it to help answer some of their concerns. Tryon recently designated a local historic district, and they got some pushback too. So yeah, you don't have to have the owner's permission. Do you for National Register? Do you know? I don't remember. But is this property in the district and the commercial? Yeah, and another thing, and that I showed you that photo of the education piece. The picture of Reed in the bottom left-hand corner was in, I guess it would be y'all's right. Anyway, my left-hand corner was in Tarboro, and it was a tax credit showcase. And y'all have done a couple across the state. And he's had people come in who have done tax credits. I think David Maurer was at that one. And I think you guys showed some buildings that were vacant, and it was pretty successful. We've done it in Lexington or Lincolnton.
Elizabeth City.
In a Hosky, maybe.
If you could send me some information on that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, that would be.
And one of the things that you need to always keep in mind is, you keep the integrity of the exterior.
Mm-hmm.
But within that, you have great latitude inside, But the exterior is what I mean, you want it to look like what it looked like.
Right.
You know, and you don't want that to change, and that's where it's addressed as far as the exterior. But within the interior, you can do many things.
For local designation, that is correct. Unless the owner does, unless they want to protect something. But now National Register, you have to follow Secretary of Interior standards on the interior as well. So tax credits, but now tax deferment, that's right, you don't have to worry about that. And we do have, it's a little controversial, but we do have local governments who have locally designated properties, so those commercial properties, as an incentive to get that 50% tax deferment. So we have a lot, especially some of these mills that are getting the 50% tax deferment and tax credits because they're also listed in the National Register. The thing I would caution you about doing that, and it sounds like it wouldn't be a problem for this property, is to make sure that that property that you are locally designating and that your local government is going to pass an ordinance, that it really is it is special to the community. You don't want, I've seen this too in local governments. I've seen somebody's house get locally designated. Their neighbor's like, hey, they got 50%, and my house is pretty cool too. And if they don't make a good argument for that first house, they have a hard time saying no to the second house. And then the next thing you know, that could snowball on you with your tax.
Base.
Thank you. Losing my words here. I need to eat so much. But Guilford County, Greensboro has a lot of individually locally landmarked properties, and it's actually enhanced. There's been some studies, I need to find it, that it's helped their tax base. So.
Kristi, this is John Brandon. David Smith put a comment in under the chat about the Baker White building in Williamston being a contributing building to the downtown historic district, and it's eligible for tax credit.
Okay.
You want to speak to that, David?
It's if you pull up the National Register listing for the downtown historic district, it lists all the contributing buildings, and all of those, I'm sure Reed would be happy to assist anyone. All of them that are still in the condition to qualify as contributing properties. There's a couple that have been modified that I'm sure don't any longer.
Right. Okay.
Would qualify for those tax credits, and the Baker White building, I'm sure, is one of those.
So I'm not sure if you heard Mr. Smith. Thank you for letting me know. I heard it beep, but I couldn't see it on my screen. So I heard that chat buzz. But anyway, if y'all couldn't hear, Mr. Smith was talking specifically about the Baker White building. He said it's already contributing in the downtown historic district, so those National Register districts I showed you, and that he felt like it's likely eligible for the tax credit. That there may be some that aren't now, though, depending on what modifications they made. But that again,
There's been a couple of facades that have been taken off and put back on with other stuff, and they no longer, I'm sure, would qualify. But most of the buildings in that district still qualify.
And did y'all hear Mr. Smith? Could y'all? Okay. And again, I'm jumping in Reed's territory, and I'm sorry, but tax credits, North Carolina for residential, it's 15%. For commercial, you get that state 15%. You get a federal 20%. And if you're in a Tier 1 or Tier 2 county, which I'm sure Martin County is, you get an extra 5%. So if it's a commercial building, it's up to 40% tax credit. So it's a huge help. It can make a big difference.
Martin County is Tier 1.
Tier 1, yes. Any other questions?
What's our next step, do you think?
So your next step, so the local governing board would have to establish a commission by ordinance.
The county commission.
The county commissioners, and that would be your next step. And then what I would do is, and I believe we have a mayor here. Okay, yeah, I saw a mayor on the sign-in sheet, 2 mayors. The next step would be to talk to the mayors about if they want to sign a interlocal agreement for the county to do preservation within their jurisdiction. And that would also need to be passed by your local governing board too.
It's no different than a dozen other things that we do. like
It's the same
these
interlocal
hybrid
agreement,
litigation plans And all kinds of stuff. Everything has to be signed off by everybody, but you get it done.
Yeah, yeah. And we're happy to talk to the local governing board if it would be helpful. So, or just informal or informal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions online? Any of the Zoom folks? Thank you guys for joining us.
I'll try to figure out how to make the recording available.
I believe Wayne Peel is going to put it on y'all's YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It will be on the YouTube channel. Let me
It's recording on my computer.
Okay, hold on to that and then watch it on the Martin County NC Historical Society YouTube and see if you had any extra beyond.
I can work with Wayne to.
Okay, that sounds good.
Everyone.
All right, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. And I guess it's still morning for you, correct? So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Y'all take care.